Perform girls at every stage of education. Single fathers who want to be more involved in their children's lives face a range of barriers. True or false? Well, it depends on whose books you are looking at. Perhaps this is the reason for the comments of the president of the 9th Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan, who was calling on everyone to celebrate the International Men's Day, but particularly speaking to men to take care of their mental health. No mean counsel given the challenges men face and the pressures they have to put themselves on. Talked about suicide the other time, because you are not unaware of the spate of suicide conversations that's been going on and on for a while. And that is perhaps well advised given the pressures they find themselves under, the pressures they put themselves under, the pressures that come just for being a man. By choice or by chance or by circumstance, well, the issues are there. This year's International Men's Day theme is Zero Male Suicide. Is this something someone can do for anyone or something you have to pay attention to yourself? So happy International Men's Day, but please, let's give attention to the man, and please call the one you haven't spoken to in a while. You never know what they're going through. Okay.
For real? Like you're sending it I thought it was International Men's Day.
Yeah. We had International Women's Day. We weighed into.
Go ahead, shoot. Well, I think that you've totally made a good case. The question now is, who are we making this appeal to? When you talk about
each other. To everybody who's listening.
Because you guys are the ones who rule the world.
You know, that's what the issue is.
We like to say we run the world. There's this whole song by Bayelsa about who runs the world. But the truth of the matter is we know at the end of the day who's in charge. So when you talk about international, when you make this appeal, are fellow men appealing to their fellow men? Is that what is happening here? But, not to make light of the issues raised by Ayo, I think that, when you do find, there's certainly issues around being a man. And I know that can really be a lot. From early childhood, we begin to condition boys that they're supposed to be a certain way. They're supposed to be tough. They're supposed to be aggressive. They're supposed to be manly. And these are all the things that we qualify and associate with being a man. And any boy who is not meeting up is termed a woman, is termed a weakling, is termed, has so many euphemisms, very unpleasant, that are attached to him. And the standards are pretty high and tough when it comes to just being a boy child, growing up to be a man in that sense. And people have been saying that recently that we need to spare more thought for our men, for boys that are growing up to be men. I think at the forefront of this, one of the people I have seen speak up more clearly about why it is, while we are focusing on the female child, we mustn't forget the male child, is the wife of the governor of Lagos State. Her pet project is actually around the boy child. So I find that quite commendable, to ensure that boys are not left out. And that statistic you mentioned around how girls do better than their male counterparts in many stages of academic development, is quite true, because I remember in my class, growing up throughout my academic years, the girls were always ahead. So that's why people have raised the question that, how come it is that, girls do so well, primary, secondary school, and even university many times, but when it comes to the workforce, you don't see them there. When it comes to, top tiers of management, etc., you don't see them there. Big questions. But nevertheless, this is the situation. The man is the head of the home. In many cases, he's the one heading institutions. In many cases, they're the ones heading government. They're the ones heading so many things. That's what I've been asking. Who exactly is this appeal, this issue you're raising? Who is it directed to? But I think it's for all of us. It's for all of us, and even for the leaders, to actually give a little more thought to the people that they lead, to pay attention. I don't think a man needs to bear it all alone. In recent times, there have been calls for men to unburden a bit more. The pressures of society can be a lot to shoulder. Families do, some reasonable families do make attempts to appreciate the fathers in their homes. I think it is not correct to say that we have two International Women's Day. There's also Father's Day, by the way. And these days, we're getting more song and dance around it. So, so that the women don't forget to celebrate. But International Men's Day, we raise the issues around being a man. At the same time, we'll thank men who truly have been men in every way. We also will bring out the issues around, and that's me again, saying having men in every way. What does it mean to be a man? Is it just by, just being a man, being identified as a male, or are there other criteria? Indeed, there are. But if indeed you have been able to stand with those criteria that society, your family, your workplace expects of you, certainly you deserve thanks. And if you're finding it quite tough, I don't think it is tough to bear problems alone. That's not being tough. That's just being silly. So as much as possible, people need to unburden. It doesn't have to be with anybody that, you don't just meet the nearest stranger and go unburden. There are people who actually take this on for a fee. Psychologists, psychotherapists, they're there. That's part of their jobs. If you do not want to speak to anybody around you, if you do not trust your friends enough, these are people that you can actually unburden to, and take the stress off of your back. Find someone to share your problems with and make it a bit light. Oftentimes we do say that, problem shared is a problem half solved. Don't joke with that. Oftentimes when you're sharing your burden is when you actually get insights into how to progress. So this is not just for women alone. It's not a woman thing. And it's okay to cry as a man. I think more and more we're beginning to say that it's okay to cry as a man. In fact, we expect men to cry. You lose a loved one, you lose a partner. I mean, I saw my father do that when my mom died. He cried like a baby, and we encouraged him to cry. It was okay for him to cry. We just didn't want him doing it in public. But yes, as much as possible, if something really hits you, if something is really painful, cry. It's all right to cry as a man. But these are the issues. I hope that fellow men are kinder to their own fellow men. Because if you look at all of these statistics that Ayo has raised in terms of men dying more by violent death, it's not women that are killing them, it's men. So we need to find out. Accidents, go and check. Who's driving cars and not taking safety precautions because they want to show that they are men? It is men. So I think that men need to pay more attention to their own well-being, pay more attention to those statistics, and men be kinder to fellow men. That will be my contribution on this beautiful day, Chamberlain. As I wish you happy International Men's Day to you and Ayo, and to every man out there, and to those behind the scenes that you cannot see.
Yeah, some of them are here as well. Yes, indeed. Thank you. And maybe this narrative might help. It's part of what, in that same breath that Ayo also read out those data. International Men's Day is marked to focus on the health and well-being of men, promote gender equality, celebrate the positive contributions of men towards society, and promote and encourage positive male role models to create a better and safer place for everyone. So, of course, they also intend to challenge that narrative, big boys don't cry, the stereotypes that men are stuck in society. And because of that, you find all sorts of things are suppressed, and then they go down with different things, and the rest is history. Yes, all of those data that you reeled out, even the ones in prison, how they go there, the hypertension rate, it's huge. But, just sitting back and looking through not just International Men's Day, but several other days, I think part of the intention is not just for us to highlight it on that particular day or this particular day, as it were, but to, in a way, rouse everyone to ensure that, because, look, yes, you could have International Men's Day, you could have International Women's Day, you could have Children's Day, but the big thing would be for society to pull together. we cannot allow the milk of human kindness in all of us to just fizzle out like that. Society will just crumble. You know how water just keeps going on the rock. You think this is not having any effect. You go back there days or months or years after, you see that it's gone. So that's the kind of effect these can have when we overlook certain things and just feel, oh, no. And culture, oh, religion. Look, there are just so many areas. But the big thing I think we should go away with on this particular matter is the importance, the essence of us looking through. I saw some data about persons who were dying, the hypertension rate in the country, and how people are dying, and it was staggering. And then if you also take a look at the mental health of lots of Nigerians here, it is equally shocking. And then we don't even have the commensurate institutions to deal with some of these things because it's a cycle, it's a system. So we don't have all of those. And you find out that, look, almost, yeah, even the big boys, everyone is caught up in that, but they can't speak up so that society can address it. These are the kind of issues that we think, we should find a way to pay attention to, because if the men who are in certain positions are not okay and are hiding it, eventually it will affect several other things that they're supposed to channel and make sure things go right. Ditto for women, ditto for children, boys, girls, the same thing. So it's a call for society, a call to society to ensure that we can rally and ensure that things go around. We're not made of rock or stone or human, flesh and blood. It runs in our blood. So we should ensure that you look out for the next person. Just as she said, I call that next person. Just, you never know. You never know. Because it will just be shocking to everybody else, even to you when you hear your close friend committed suicide. You say, oh, I didn't know. Might have been inaction on the part of persons who are closest to them, because those are the people that hit most when those things happen. So you never really know, guys. All right, let's go through some of the dailies here this morning. Of course, I don't mind the call. Oh, yeah, bring it on. I don't mind it. Take a look at The Guardian today. Yes, indeed. After, it's okay to speak up, isn't it?
Especially if money is accompanying it.
I don't know who will say no to that. So look at this. Money is accompanying this one, but I think it's not the right way. That's what The Guardian is highlighting. They say Lagos, others caught in fiscal recklessness amid huge legacy debts. And look at this, states contentious budget lines. So they see Lagos Rail Mass Transit, 218 billion naira. Bulletproof SUV for COS, 440.75 million naira. Benue government.
For COS, sorry, which COS is that?
Well, it could be for, let me not misread it.
COS is Chief of Staff, right?
Well, that's what comes to mind.
The Chief of Staff to the governor?
That's where the big question is, right? Why I thought, okay, we should just go into the daily and find out, okay, are they missing something? What could he actually be? Is he really Chief of Staff? Yeah, that's what they're highlighting for us to spur us into action. That's what adverts are supposed to do. Move you to taking the next step. If adverts don't achieve that, you go do your copy testing again. Benue government, 2 billion naira vehicle for self-officials. Then you see LASRA, that's the Resident Registration Agency, 7.99 billion naira. What about this one? Fragrance, yes, fragrance for governor's office, 7.475 million naira.
Million or billion?
Million. Fragrance.
That's for the fragrance.
Yep.
Well, if everything that's been budgeted for, and go on, please. And the place has to smell nice. It has to come under a budget line, doesn't it?
Yeah, but governor's office.
But fragrance, really.
Ad hoc chartered plane, 400 million naira. Oyo allocates 43.5 million naira to purchase 55 fire extinguishers, 200 million naira legal fees for election. So you see, they just highlight these things. So you can make of it what you will. Perhaps that's the essence. Make of it what you will, but they say, look, these are contentious budget lines. So I guess if there are to be a lot more explanation. If we had a parliamentary system where they need to go speak up and talk about all of this, do you think that, I mean, some of these things might have gotten more clarity, let them explain the thought process behind all of this, the whys and the wherefores? Who knows? Who knows? So, yeah, it's just that sometimes we confuse our parliamentary system with presidential democracy, where we mix certain things. We take some things they do for the parliamentary system, and we're doing it in a presidential system thing, and then it doesn't have the same effect. Impeachment, vote of confidence, several scenarios. But look, we'll come to that much later. Magu breaks silence after 4 years. X-rays corruption war. You might want to know what's up there. So that is Guardian today.
Well, that certainly should be an interesting read. It'll be very interesting to know what he has to say. But this is what we're looking at on the front page of New Telegraph. Now, when I was asking, who precisely is this International Men's Day addressed to? But what we're going to do a challenge. We'll look on the front page of each of the dailies and we'll see how many women's pictures are there.
Is that what it's supposed to be?
What? That we see men everywhere?
Well, we see women everywhere too.
Okay.
I'm seeing...
You just finished reviewing The Guardian. How many women's faces were there?
No,
this is the New Telegraph.
It's not by those pictures.
You can see the pictures there. Yeah, the pictures of at least 6 men. So sometimes when we talk about
we see all women's pictures,
and we say that every day is International Men's Day, we know what it is we're talking about. New Telegraph is the paper I'm looking at for you this morning, and they have this: lawyers, why governors must sign condemned prisoners' death warrants. Say refusal to do so worsening prison congestion. So you find details on pages 14 and 16.
So who are those in prison more? Do we have more women there?
Well, is there fellow men that
because the challenge I can't finish this morning.
Refusing to sign the death warrant. 14 and 16 as the details for you. Big questions as to why governors refuse to sign this death warrant. I remember once I was privileged to host a conversation behind the scenes with the governor, and I asked, why is it that you won't sign a death warrant? And he says, who made me God? He cannot just take somebody else's life. I think that, there are those kinds of beliefs, personal as it might be, sometimes contradict the powers that have been given to the governors by the virtue of their office. And the powers that they wield when it comes to justice. And when you have those kinds of beliefs, I remember, I think it was a governor, it was Governor Adams Oshomole, when he was governor of Edo State, who said, I will sign the death warrants. If you do this and do this and do this, just take note, I will sign it. I think that time kidnapping was rife. And they passed a law that, you will die by death if you're caught as a kidnapper. I think the governor was underscoring the fact that he'll sign that death warrant.
But for those governors who feel that who made them God by signing death warrant, they should also know that when there are corruption cases against you, when money is meant to do certain things and not done, when roads that are to be constructed, you channel the money away. When the budget for education is not done, you're taking lives. Not just saying, I'm not going to
signing a death warrant.
No.
When hospitals are not built and women die on delivery beds.
I just being hypocritical. Don't deceive yourself. If those things are against you in your government, you're already signing death warrants. So please, next fellow.
Second buzz, according to fella, all right? I mean, second busy. Pages 14 and 16. You have a number of other stories right here. Appeal court sacks PDP's Muftwang as Plateau governor. That is still on the front burner as well. Verdict, a temporary setback, says Muftwang. Pages 3, 5, and 26 is where you'll find details. And look at this. APC PDP trade words over purported suspension of Osun Chief Judge. I think that this cannot be in the area of speculation. The governor of Osun State needs to come out very clearly and let us know if the Chief Judge is still very much on her seat or she's been fired, because there's been heavy speculation around the position of the Chief Judge and why she might have been fired. I mean, this has to do with signing somebody's death warrant. So that is something that, or at least saying that the person was to die by hanging.
Wow.
In a very, very serious and scandalous murder case. So I hope that the Osun State governor and government will not just paper over that controversy and hope that it will go away. I hope that they come up with very clear clarifications on the issue. Looking on top of the nameplate, CBN currency in circulation rises by 8.56% to 2.99 trillion naira. So hopefully we shouldn't be seeing any scarcity of currency in this season. External reserves resume decline, lose $112.98 million. That's a lot of money. They have a whole lot of stories for you, but let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Well, there's a story on that front page, that I would have loved, that I just want to call attention to. It's at the bottom of the page. Prolonged time on tech devices harm children's brains. That's according to a study. So when you give a device to a child to engage that child, believe me, you are actually killing that child's brain. No different from what you guys spoke about the other time. The Leadership newspaper this morning has a major story. That's following what you said, Maokwe, and the picture is the major story for me. I counted more than 10 women on the front page of the Leadership newspaper this morning. More than 10 women. I'm just saying. Let's go to this story. So, more than 10. I mean, count if you want. Yes, Maokwe, go ahead. I can see you're trying to count. Count. Both in the front and at the back and at the rear back. More than 10 of them. But hey, the lead story, 25 years after, FG may restore controversial Malibu oil well. Stories on page 4. Dutch Shell, Italian ENI favored to get mining license after years of disputes. Former AGF advocate seeks political exoneration, and petroleum minister keeps mum. Which petroleum minister? I thought there are 2 of them. But hey, stories right there on the front page. You'll find the details on page 4 of the paper. Right under the nameplate, cost of renewable energy may hamper Nigeria's targets. What does that mean? Find the details on the inside pages. That political story is there. Protest rocks Plateau as appeal court sacks Governor Muftwang. We'll get some more perspective on that this morning. Supreme Court Judicial Council awaits list of nominees. Find that story on page 7. And a host of other stories, as Maokwe mentioned earlier. That's the Leadership newspaper this morning.
Supreme Court. Rumble in Judiciary over nomination of justices. Names on the FJSC's list excellent. Professor Akinshoye George, SAN. No cause for alarm. NJC, CJN. So that's the big lead on the front page of the paper here today. But they're also quick to remind us, inflation. Declining demand triggers 20% fall in food, beverage production. So that's warning signals there. Warning signals right there for us all to see. So it's
But it might pick up in this season, you know. We normally do hampers, and there might be a bit more in demand. Hopefully, you know, the way we give gifts will not change.
well,
I know that people
when
might
they buy bags of rice. How much is a bag of rice now? How much was it years ago? So, if people's purchasing power is dwindled, rapidly declining, how will they buy them? So those are some of the stark reality, you know, that we're gonna have to deal with. And on the front page here, which also features on the back page at the bottom strip, sports. Sack Pasero now. Nigerians kick after another poor outing by Eagles. So you see, the play, I've not even actually confessed, I've not bothered to sit down and watch because I might not be able to bear it. It will be another heartache for men. So I just thought, you know what? Let me hear the results You know, I was busy working, so that's quite understandable. But those matches, goodness me, it could spoil your day. Even our sports department thought, don't worry, we got this. We have this. We barely survived the last match. And look at the opponents. There are no minors in football these days. If you don't respect them, they'll teach you a lesson, which we've seen in the 2 matches now. So it looks as though Nigeria may not even sit up.
You might become a Mino.
So this NFF leadership, they have to ask themselves very hard questions. If Nigerians don't go for World Cup again, ready. That's Vanguard anyway.
Yeah. And I'm counting how many men are on the front page of Vanguard, just in case. Thanks be to God for leadership newspaper saving the day. But take a look at the Abuja Inquirer. Ayo, it's game on, you and I. You show me which other paper has how many women you just counted. So you can see right there on the front page of the Abuja Inquirer, FCTA set to abolish shared C of O. Okay, this is very interesting. Recertification of housing estates to begin. Hope for allottees of area councils' land. Wike indicts AGIS in land racketeering. So you find details somewhere on page 3 of the paper. Now, this is the people who should actually hold the master plan. And if they're involved in racketeering, you know, then it's quite sad to see. But, you know, they also have this front page comment, which might be a bit controversial, but it's right there. Front page comment: before the courts heal over our democracy. The story is on page 4 of the paper. And then look at that. NDLEA arrest Abuja drug lord 7 years after jailbreak. The story is right there on page 3. Let's leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
Look at the Nigerian Observer this morning. Of course, it also has pictures of some men. And don't forget the saying, behind every successful man, there is a woman. So for every man you see, you are seeing a woman as well. Just saying, okay. Deplorable Benin, Auchi, other FG roads worsen food inflation in South-South. That's the lead story of the Nigerian Observer this morning. And you find the details continue on the inside pages. Above the nameplate, Obaseki decries rising inflation, dollarization of Nigeria's economy, urges urgent economic policy review, and others. Find the details continue on the inside pages. These two have been garnering attention, and Mark, I mean, it's something we've been talking about here. But guess who and who have joined? Serap and Budget. Serap, Budget, others sue Tinubu over Rex appointments. The silence is very, very concerning. I think one other paper this morning says that the APC is trying to make Nigeria a one-party state. So what does all of that mean? You find the details in those papers, but this particular one is asking for some judicial intervention on the appointment of the resident electoral commissioners, particularly because they are card-carrying members of one political party or the other. That story you'll find details of on page 5. That's the Nigerian Observer this morning.
Okay, by the way, why? Somebody said I should tell you chop knuckle. Look at Daily Trust this morning. Job racketeering.
For every man you see, there's a woman behind her.
Where did you pull that from?
I don't know.
Talking about pulling a rabbit from a hat. Okay, look at this. Job racketeering. Ripples at Character Commission over reps delayed report. Integrity commissioners allege plot to kill report. Why in Sambisa rendered redundant FCC directors. Allegations baseless. Commission's chair. Our probe report undergoing routine legislative process. Ascribed to reps right there. So there you go. And then speaking of which, I don't miss being president. Let's just say that.
Buhari.
That's right.
It's not hard to guess. That was
Ouch.
That was not hard to get.
Why does that sound like shots fired?
I mean, he was one president who could not wait to go home. I can't wait to go home. I can't wait to stop being president.
Well, he contested like 4 times, didn't he?
Look, I don't know. The people who pushed him to go and contest in 2019, I don't think they meant well for him, to be honest. Even he could have said he didn't want to do it. Because
But
it was like as if he couldn't
this country, this country, I've never seen people. Anyway, good luck, Jonathan. Now, George Oponware, I think, has left a very good legacy for himself.
Indeed, he
fantastic
has.
footballer, lovely, great guy, and now also living his footsteps in the sands of time in the way he conceded. So that's a legacy. Those are the kind of things you want to see being done across length and breadth of Africa, because it can be done, because it's already been done.
Yeah.
No excuses from any quarters whatsoever. And then one more here. Uproar over Sanwo-Olu's 3.75 billion naira perfume rechargeable fans. Oh, this is billion now. So combining perfume and rechargeable fans. 3.75 billion naira, guys.
Is where are they using it all over Lagos?
I can't.
Are we perfuming Lagos?
It's too heavy for my mouth to say.
Look,
3.75 billion.
there are so
naira perfume.
many questions to ask. That's why I was asking you what was on the front page. Was it 7 million or 7 billion?
It's billion.
Yeah, so you might want to... Don't run away with the headline. Don't run away with the headline. Just read the story first before you decide on what exactly it is you're talking about.
What, to find out if it's over Lagos?
I know. Maybe they're about to perfume the streets of Lagos now. We don't know.
Oh, dear.
Okay, this Nigeria is what I'm looking at for you now. It says it's an exclusive. Banks, industry chiefs panic as report on Emefiele ready for submission to president.
Bring it on.
Make frantic moves for soft landing. Over 3 trillion naira reportedly siphoned through COVID-19 and anchor borrower scheme. Well, that's the lead story that they have for you. Apparently, it's an exclusive. It's something that they've been able to get as a scoop. Don't forget that there was this, I think the president said, was it a forensic, somebody who was supposed to be reporting directly to him? I think the report is now ready and...
Oh, yeah, the investigation panel. He used to be head of FRC or something like that.
Yes, so it looks like...
Regulatory Council of Nigeria.
Indeed. So it does appear that the report is ready now and they're about to submit it to the president. But take a look at this. Serap budget. 34 Nigerians sue Tinubu for appointing APC loyalists as top INEC officials. You find details on page 6. So these ones are not just going to be complaining about it like we are doing every day. They are taking it to the courts. And then look at the bottom there. Protest rocks Plateau over appeal court sack of Governor Mutwang. FCT extends deadline for payment of ground rent to December 14. Okay. And Osun MBA rejects Adeleke's acting CJ. So this is not something to just ignore. As we said again, it does appear that there might be some substance to some of the controversy that has now plagued the purported removal of the chief judge of Osun State. So page 14 is where the story is, and as I've said, we need clarity on that particular matter. Kano knocks kudos as embattled governor heads to Supreme Court. So it looks like all of the governorship cases will be ending at the Supreme Court after all. Let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
Okay, so there you go. That wraps it up. And look at some of the dailies here this morning. We're back in a moment. Stay on with us.
The Abuja division of the appeal court is filled with political party members from Plateau State, lawyers and journalists who have turned out for the judgment in the appeals filed by the All Progressives Congress and its candidate, Mr. Nentawe Goshwe, against the election of Governor Caleb Mutfwang of Plateau State. This is coming about a week after the three-member panel reserved its judgment in the appeals brought before it on October 10, 2023 by the appellants who are challenging the victory of Governor Mutfwang on the ground that the latter was not qualified to have contested the March 18, 2023 election because he was not validly sponsored and nominated by his political party, the People's Democratic Party, PDP. An election tribunal sitting in Plateau State had struck out the petitions of the appellants on the grounds that the issue of lack of structure by the PDP in Plateau State and whether Governor Mutfwang was sponsored by his party or not were internal party affairs and that they were also pre-election matters. However, the Court of Appeal on Resumption set aside a judgment of the tribunal, describing it as highly incompetent. Delivering the lead judgment, Justice Elfreda Williams Dawodo noted that under Section 134C of the Electoral Act and Section 177 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it is the sole right of the political party to sponsor its candidate, having met the necessary requirements to do so. The panel held that the PDP violated a court order that a valid Congress be conducted in the 17 local government areas of Plateau State by conducting Congress in only 5 local government areas of the state, and as such is a nullity. While evoking Section 136 of the Electoral Act, the court ordered INEC to retrieve the certificate of return issued to Governor Mutfwang and issue a fresh one to the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Mr. Nentawe Goshwe. Agreeing with the judgment, Justice Okon Abang said, unless the PDP resolves its issues in Plateau State, it will always suffer self-inflicted misfortune.
We are very, very happy with the judgment. We listened to it with rapt attention. It covered so many areas. We advise members of the public to please read the judgment first before some people begin to have negative views of it.
But the counsel to PDP feels differently.
Today in the judgment, we did not hear anything about nomination. Everything that was said in this court today was about sponsorship. And of course, we know that when you mention sponsorship, it could be pre-election or post-election. But when you talk about nomination, the courts do not have any jurisdiction to entertain it as a post-election matter.
While the appellants savour their victory, this judgment may not be the end of the road for Governor Caleb Mutfwang as he can appeal to the Supreme Court. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Yeah, welcome back. So, taking a look at that court judgment and the others, and then, of course, the perception and impression that people do have of the judiciary. So we've got Professor Richard Nwokocha, who is an associate professor of public law, Rivers State University, and also former chairman of MBA, Omuku, Rivers State. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Okay, Prof, if you could unmute, I'm not sure, just double check if you're muted yourself, sir, because I didn't hear that response from you. All right, so let me start on a broader note. So if you could just tell us, I mean, you know, do you in any way interface with members of the public about their impression of judgments being handed down by the courts, as it were? And if you do, what impression do you get of them about some of these judgments from courts these days?
So far, the judgments that have been handed down appear to be okay, but, you know, from time to time, you have judgments that seem to conflict with others. However, you will need to examine closely the position of the law before you can determine that there is actually a conflict. But definitely, down to the judgment of yesterday, there are issues raised as to what the borderline is between what is a pre-election matter and whether an issue that could be a pre-election matter could also be a live issue or a post-election issue. I think those kind of conflicts will come up, but probably by the time the Supreme Court rules or gives judgment on gubernatorial matters that are going to the Supreme Court that have similar issues, then the situation will become clear from the Supreme Court judgments.
But the ones that ended at the appeal, they won't have the benefits of that. They're gone now, even if they feel hard done by.
They are gone. All matters, since all matters involving the National Assembly end at the Court of Appeal, what it means is that for such matters, they won't have the benefit of being affected by whatever the Supreme Court eventually says concerning those issues. Those are decided because the Court of Appeal decisions are final on those ones.
Do you think that there should be a change? Because there might be some who, at the end of the day, when some of these cases from the governorship gets to the Supreme Court and then they decide, some of them that are gone now in the Assembly may think, you see, same principle applied to ours. Now, look at this. You think that will happen?
Unfortunately, no. Very unlikely that will happen. Again, because election matters are timed. There are timelines, and you cannot revisit a concluded matter. That would definitely be outside the timeline.
No. I'm asking if you think that, for instance, those who their cases ended at the appeal, the National Assembly members, if at the end of the day, the cases are determined by the Supreme Court, the governorship cases, some of them may feel that the cases that are being determined by the Supreme Court may just be the same kind of principle, the similar narrative or similar cases, if I could just use that word, for theirs. So I'm asking. Yeah.
Definitely, because for many of them, the same issues affecting them are the issues affecting the governorship elections, since the elections are held on the same day. Take the issue of yesterday, for instance, the judgment of Plateau State. If the primaries that produced the governor is faulty because those who were involved in that primaries were not valid delegates, it also means that the same primary that produced those at the national that contested for the National Assembly position was also faulty. So either way, what affects the governorship will affect the National Assembly once it has to do with the root or foundation of the process of election or nomination of those candidates. So definitely there will be that feeling, definitely.
So what, because I mean, the case of Abia, some have said, but the same case that throughout a Labour Party member of the National Assembly did not throw out the governor because it's the same party, the same principle, the same case, similar matter. But that's on the one hand. Now, about this case of yesterday, which you speak about now, what sticks out for you in that particular case?
Well, the critical issue about that decision is the issue of whether an issue can be both a pre-election matter and a post-election matter. Upon close examination, questioning the process by which a party elected or nominated candidates can be said to be an internal matter, as the courts have heard in a number of those cases you referred to. But perhaps what is peculiar about yesterday's decision is the question it is raising. And that is the question whether the party did at all put up a candidate. Because the law provides for steps that a party has to take if it's interested in contesting in the election. And the argument in that case is that the party did not take those steps and so did not feature in the election. Basically, the law requires that a party that intends to participate should nominate governor by holding primary governorship candidates by holding a primaries in which delegates will vote in a free and fair environment and express their choice. The argument in this case is that the party did not hold such primaries because what was purportedly held was set aside by a court that ordered that congresses should be held in the entire 17 local governments should be reheld, meaning that whatever they did was set aside by the court did not exist in the eyes of the law. This is kind of taking us back to 2018 on the issues that emanated from Rivers State. And so once the court nullified them and asked that they be reconducted, non-conducting or non-reconducting of those congresses or what are they called again at the local level, the non-conducting of those exercises now meant that you proceeded to nominate a candidate without complying with the law, that is, doing what the law says you should do if you want to participate in the election, which is holding a primaries, because no valid primary can be held by non-existent persons. The argument simply means they had no delegates because the one they were ordered to get was not done. And so whatever they produced was produced without existing delegates. That now has a constitutional flavor and raises the question whether the party exists in the election. And that's what the Court of Appeal resolved or decided, that the party did not participate in the election by virtue of the fact that it did not validly nominate candidates.
So under what circumstances, if you could help us interpret that section 1341 of the Electoral Act, under what circumstances is another party allowed to look into this matter? And then, I mean, the counsel to the PDP there was talking about jurisdiction, that if they speak about sponsorship of a candidate, the question of jurisdiction comes in here. So could you explain that?
Well, if you look at the provision 137, it talks of effect of non-compliance. Yeah, it talks of effect of non-compliance. And it says where the election is nullified by the court and notice of, it shall not be necessary for a party who alleges non-compliance with the provisions of this act for the conduct of election to call oral evidence if originals or certified true copies manifestly disclose the non-compliance alleged. Now, apparently, certified true copies of the judgment of the court ordering the reconduct of the earlier processes must have been tendered before this court. And the question now will be, since the jurisdiction of the election tribunal includes determining whether anybody was validly elected, what the court has done is to determine that that question includes whether a person exists in the first place in the process before he can be validly elected. That's what the decision of yesterday has tried to do. So the argument of the other party is that because it touches on qualification, that it should be a pre-election matter. But the Court of Appeal is saying, if you did not in the first place carry out the processes that the law prescribes for nominating somebody, then you did not nominate and you were not present in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, so Prof, what about the condition preceding that section 137 in 1341, where they talk about the grounds of appeal? Who is it that can? Because some people say that no, but they thought they're supposed to be members of that same political party, not another member of another political party.
Yeah, that's for challenging the outcome of a primaries. But what we are talking about here is whether a primaries was held at all. Yesterday's judgment is saying, in the eyes of the law, no primaries was held because the delegates who should hold the primaries did not exist. The court, High Court, nullified the previous exercise they did electing delegates and ordered them to reconduct those exercises in a manner that is consistent with the law, and that they did not do. They simply went on with the ones elected that the court had set aside to hold the primaries. So the question is, was there a primaries, considering that there were no valid delegates that could have held primaries? And the Court of Appeal is saying that that is a live issue, an issue that can be decided post-election by the election tribunal.
Wow, it's a really delicate situation in Plateau State, and I guess in other states as well. And as you said, a very fine line between determining what will constitute pre-election and post-election matters. But the last time we spoke with you on this program, and I'm going to just rewind a bit, we were speaking with you with regards to the situation in Rivers State, and there's been plenty of quiet there since we last saw that the State Assembly was burnt. You know, there was a bit of fracas between the governor and his predecessor. Can you give us bring us up to speed as to what the current situation is, politically speaking, from what you know on the ground?
Well, there is calm, but a calm that appears to be an uneasy calm, because you have two combatants, and one is consistently saying we need peace. I'm for peace, and we have to pursue peace. Peace is the best option. The other is not directly saying the opposite, but is consistently talking of conditions and talking of, you touch my structure, X, Y, Z will happen, expect trouble, you're going to have trouble, and all that. So it gives the impression that on one side, it appears to be over, but on the other side, there are still five parties who come on the same line and will actually have peace. But at the moment, it's a graveyard kind of calm that everybody is anticipating that something will erupt at some stage.
Okay, what about the House of Assembly? You know, we also saw some activities around there. The speaker was purportedly, the leader was purportedly removed. Another speaker was purportedly elected, etc., etc. Has there been any confusion as to who the leader is? Or were all of those activities set aside and they went back to status quo? What precisely is the situation?
We can't say for now. The House has not, officially speaking, in the normal environment, has not reconvened. And there appears to still be claims of different speakership. So perhaps until the House is able to reconvene and we find one person presiding, the situation remains that way. I'm not sure the peer works has taken place, and there has not been a joint sitting of the two factions of the House. So at the moment, we appear to still have speakers both ways, and we appear to still have the House divided between the two factions.
Okay, interesting. So let's look at the matter now, which is before us, the court judgments. And it's very interesting and very delicate, this matter which you raised, because I also know that during the presidential hearings, the presidential election petition hearings, one of the things that was challenged was the membership of former governor and presidential candidate of the Labour Party, his membership of the Labour Party. And the APC was challenging that, saying that he wasn't even a member of the Labour Party at the time that he was contesting to be president. And the Supreme Court seemed to have ruled on that matter. Not seemed, they did rule on the matter, saying that that was something that somebody within the Labour Party was supposed to have brought up. So in this particular matter now, you say that this is about contesting whether, Governor Muftuang was even a candidate at all. And it's not something that somebody within the PDP must bring up. I'm just wondering, how do we tell the difference? How do we tell the difference? When do we say, oh, this is something that is an internal party matter and only somebody within a political party can bring it? And when it is a broader issue that anybody, and I don't know if this is anybody or maybe just another political party or somebody who's contesting an election can raise?
Well, the obvious fact is that we will all have to somehow wait for the Supreme Court to speak finally on it, on what the final position of that issue is. But you recall that even I think that's Kogi State election, the issue of membership of party was also a ground for the Court of Appeal holding the position that it took, which is still subject to final upholding by the Supreme Court when the matter comes up before the Supreme Court. So I think once there is a non-compliance with the constitutional requirements for existing in the process, it may be a ground that may be raised validly by another party. What a party member must raise is any question as to whether the process was properly done. But I think what I'm finding to be the difference is whether process was properly done or was not done at all are two different things. So if the process required by law for you to participate in a process is not followed, that may be a completely different question from whether you followed it and XYZ steps in the process was not fully complied with. That may be an internal matter. But as to whether you presented candidates, I suspect that that may be a matter that may be considered one that can be treated or addressed even after election. But as I said, the Supreme Court will give a final decision on whether or not those separations can be made and whether such pre-election looking matter can survive as a post-election issue. For me, it is non-participation and improper participation. And it appears to me that one that, like this one, that a court nullified the process and you proceeded with it, may lead to the same kind of situation that we had in 2018 in Rivers State, when the Supreme Court said you can't build something on nothing. If there was no process, then you could not have used ghosts or spirits to elect or nominate candidates from a primaries.
Okay, so we'll take a break now. When we come back, I'd like us to take a look at the implications of this, because some people will say, oh, they're not even contesting the votes anymore. This is not a question of, oh, I want more votes here than you did, or, you know, I'm contesting whether or not the people voted for a particular candidate, and what implications this will have for our democracy moving forward. But let's take a break now. We'll be back shortly. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We're still talking about the recent decision of the Court of Appeal sacking the current governor of Plateau State, Caleb Mutfwang. He's since said he's going to be appealing that at the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, we have with us Richard Wokocha, who is an associate professor of public law, Rivers State University, and former chairman of the MBA in Omoku in Rivers State. Prof, so just before we went on break, I did say that we're going to be talking about the implications of this, the fact that, you know, it does appear that the appeal court is quite upset that, well, maybe the word is stronger than upset, but very displeased that a court order looked like it was not obeyed. When the Congress was cancelled and they asked them to go and conduct congresses in all 17 local governments, it does appear that that was not complied with. I mean, we read the words of Justice Okonabang just during the break saying that that was a joke taken too far. And another justice who also said that you cannot, being a member is the first thing first, excuse me, of a political party. But then there are also those who say, look, the PDP was actually put on the ballot and the people stamped their votes in favor of the PDP. That is not being contested. And some people think it's a dangerous precedent for those votes not to matter in the current conversation that we're having. It seems it's a very difficult dilemma that the court has found itself in.
It will appear to be so. But I think we need to look at where this is all going. What really is an issue? There seems to be two questions here. Did the Court of Appeal go beyond what it should go, where it should go? Because the constitutional qualification is that you have to be a member of a party and you have to have been nominated by the party. So there are two things here. Being a member is one ground. Being nominated is a different ground. And the court is saying, if you were not duly nominated, then you were not qualified to contest because that is qualification. And the court is saying that is a life issue that can be raised in a post-election petition. On the other hand, we're arguing whether we should be looking at whether the party itself not conforming with the law is an issue that we should worry about. Because elections are process-driven, and internal democracy is always key in talking about the final value of the process. So if the law provides what should be done and a court orders you, remember, it's not just the issue of a court ordering. It's about the implication of a court nullifying a process and ordering its reconduct. In law, when a court nullifies a process, that process is as good as not having been held. And so if the court orders that you should reconduct, not reconducting it means that you did not at all conduct the process, which is a necessity.
Well, sincere apologies about that, Prof. But, you know, one of the things that struck me very strongly when you began to talk about the thing, you know, either held or not held properly. One issue that's been recurring in my mind, and in the entire process, no one has mentioned INEC. I believe that, I mean, unless, you know, the facts have changed, INEC is supposed to monitor all primaries of political party. Now, when we hear cases such as you have, you know, detailed to us that the court nullified a primary process, and then INEC eventually put the name of that particular candidate on the ballot. First of all, let's answer the question whether or not you think INEC could have been indicted in this, given that they were supposed to monitor a validly held primaries.
Very possible. It's very possible that you could have joined INEC, or you could have blamed INEC. But I think they were probably trying to be smart, because if you do that, that may bring it more in line with the pre-election question. Because any question as to whether INEC validly or improperly stopped a candidate is one that is to be determined as a pre-election question. So they may have smartly, if you like, chosen to avoid that route so that it doesn't emphasize that issue of pre-election question. And they are focusing on the issue of qualification according to the Constitution, valid nomination.
Yeah, but then who should confirm whether someone was validly nominated or not? The process ought to have been through a primary. I listened to Mr. Chiabayesi and also saying there that the court used the language sponsorship, not nomination. Now, the fact that the name of the individual was on the ballot in the first place is something that I'm wondering, why would that happen if we have an umpire who is supposed to ensure that only the properly nominated individuals got on the ballot in the first place? And the process of nomination includes being sponsored, a candidate being sponsored by a political party whose image is the one on the ballot and not the image of the candidate.
You know, the facts of this case, I can't tell if that's what deceived INEC, but the court ordered reconduct in the entire 17 local governments, and they had a reconduct in 5 local governments. Did that deceive INEC into thinking that they had complied with the law? That is one issue. But does the position of INEC, whether it accepts or does not accept, override the constitutional provision of valid nomination, which is sponsorship? That's the language of the Constitution. Does it override the constitutional provision for sponsorship by a political party? I'm afraid that even if INEC was in error, it will not amount to an amendment of the law. It does not change the position of the law.
Well, you know, Prof, it's very interesting, I mean, where this is all going. Well, Marquez stated this issue of the voter the other time. All of the votes that went, and it also underscores what Mr. Falana SAN also said in the slide we presented earlier. Why should the voter be the one to be punished for the errors of a political party. Do you see an end to this kind of process where after the voters have cast their votes, selected, and the process has produced someone, then the court is the one that acts like some kind of electoral umpire, electoral college, to determine whether or not the person that the people elected was supposed to be in office in the first place? How do you see all of that playing out, particularly for the voter whose confidence in the electoral process is already shaky?
I agree completely that these developments affect voters' confidence on one hand, and secondly, where INEC is in default, that they should be punished, but that is already the position of the law. So if we are not doing it, it's not a question of lack of provision of the law, it's a question of our not implementing what is in the law. The law provides that if anybody, including any electoral official, engages in any activity that compromises the election, that he should be brought to book. There are provisions to that effect. So I think that is different. But I am afraid that not obeying a court order is not one for which you can hold INEC responsible. It's a misconduct on your own part, and a misconduct for which you will pay the price should it arise. So in this case, opponents have taken up the non-compliance with the order of the court and pointed out to the tribunal that, look, this means they did not have any exercise at all. They did not join in this election because they did not do what the law says should be done to come into the election. It's not a question of whether they did it properly or not properly, like an aspirant should contest. This is non-sponsorship, and the court has agreed with them. So I think it's not really INEC in this particular case that we should be worried about. It is the parties not complying with the provisions of the law.
I understand.
Especially where they are.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yes. Yeah, especially where that attention has been drawn to it by a court that has invalidated what was done.
Okay. Well,
if you were in error and you did not realize you were in error, and a court calls your attention to it by giving you a judicial decision and you fail to comply with it, I am afraid we cannot blame any other person. It's entirely your action, and you will be entirely responsible for it.
The other wing of that question, Prof, is the result of the elections and the confidence of the voter. As far as they are concerned, whoever is on the ballot, whose name appears, whose image or whatever appears on the ballot, has gone through the process. So when they vote for these particular individuals and the results are counted and this fellow is said to have won, both in the case, for Plateau and Kano as well. And they said that, okay, this fellow has won the election. In the case of Kano, they're saying that there was no membership. He was not a member of a political party in the first place. So for as long as the voter can see the name of this individual on the ballot, their assumption is that the fellow has gone through the process. And it only indicts the electoral umpire if it is the court that now says that this individual didn't go through the process properly in the first place. So how do we ensure that whoever is going to get on the ballot in the first place, I'm not even talking about this nomination thing, I'm talking about the sponsorship, the process, because the voter is now, we saw jubilation, we saw protests in different parts of both of these states, for and against. The voter is right now the one who is at the lower rung of the ladder, who is bearing the bitter end of the stick. So how do we ensure that? What are we missing to ensure that whoever gets on the ballot in the first place is the person that should be on the ballot and the people's vote will count? Because with these judgments now, it seems that the people's vote is not counting.
I think that's a question we need to examine closely. Now, if you look at the present position of the law, does INEC really have powers to disqualify a person? I know that that has been implied in some decision, but look at the provision of the law establishing INEC. Ask yourself whether the law gives INEC the power to do so. Remember again that the Electoral Act says anybody who has any question to that effect should approach the courts. Can INEC play the role of or part of the court? If INEC is not the court and INEC cannot determine the legitimacy of participation, can we really hold INEC responsible if at the end of the day, the court finds that in interpreting a situation that a particular party or a particular candidate was not validly brought into the process, was not validly sponsored or nominated by his party. It appears to be a matter that is outside INEC, because INEC has not even been given the powers to play the role of the court in such matter. The provision in the Electoral Act asking for a person who feels otherwise to go to court for a judicial determination of that fact is still there in the law. So can INEC assume the powers of the courts?
Okay.
I suspect the answer would be no.
Interesting. So now both parties in Plateau State and in Kano State have decided that they're going to the Supreme Court. Do you see anything changing given the facts that you have reeled out? Because you also said that perhaps there is a necessity for the Supreme Court to give some clarification on some of these things. What are your expectations?
Well, we have, in those two matters, we have one issue raised, and that is whether we can have an issue of qualification arising after election for determination by the election tribunal. And I think that is what the Supreme Court is going to shed light on, because the question of party membership and valid nomination, otherwise called sponsorship by a political party, which is contained in the Constitution, are the issues that are in question, and they are all issues of whether the candidate was qualified to be elected. And if you go by the Electoral Act, grounds of petition, you may actually find that the electoral petition tribunal or court tribunal may have some competence to answer some of these questions.
So, Prof, pardon me if I could just jump in. I see different lawyers also raising key issues. They say, but there's already precedents from the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court on the same subject matter. So does that then mean that they're jettisoning precedents in this kind of case? But besides that, just one more before we go. The members of the party, the PDP, say, look, this is not about conducting primaries for officers in those political offices, that it is about Congress, party Congress in 2021, and that they had it in 17 local government areas. They had quorum and not primaries, as many seem to say. And that they even show documents that that was done.
Yes, in 5 local governments, unless there is another certificate of fact that was not produced before the petition tribunal. The other was reconduct the 11. They reconducted 5 and used delegates from the remaining number, which is 6. Used delegates from all of them to conduct primaries. It raises question of who nominated or who elected the aspirants that became candidates at the primaries, who held the primaries. So if you partially complied with the decision of the court and left some, you have questions to answer. Now, on the first issue of precedent by a court of appeal, the court of appeal is the court of appeal. And if the court of appeal holds 2 different opinions, that's why we'll have the Supreme Court that will eventually decide it. The decision of a court of appeal has persuasive effect on another court of appeal, that is another sitting of the court of appeal. It does not have the binding effect that decision of a superior court, the Supreme Court, will have on such courts. So at the end of the day, it is the superior court, which is the Supreme Court, that will determine which of the positions taken by the 2 court of appeal decisions is consistent with the law. And that's why we have the appellate system up to the Supreme Court in those matters.
All right, then Richard Nwokocha, Associate Professor of Public Law, Rivers State University, and former Chairman, MBE Omuku. Thank you for joining us this morning.
It's a citizen's duty. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, back in a moment. We're focusing on Kano next. Stay on with us. All right, welcome back. So we'll be talking about Kano now. So we'll leave out Bauchi, as you may have heard in that report. So two gentlemen join us this morning. Salihu Tanko Yakasai, former spokesman to the Kano State Governor of the All Progressives Congress, joining us from our studios in Kano. And here we've got Muhammad Jamu, Special Advisor, International Public Relations for the Kano Governor of the NNPP. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Let me start with you, Mr. Jamu. Well, clearly your party is not happy with this decision, but as you heard in that report, the 9 grounds of the appeal went in favor of the APC candidate. So how's your party responding to this? How are they taking it?
Well, good morning. Good morning, Nigerians listening and watching us from the world. When decisions like this are taken, definitely you wouldn't be happy. And what makes us not happy about it, because of the judicial rigmarole happening in the country. We were faced by an instance whereby in a plethora of judicial pronouncements, courts have gone the other way. But suddenly, when it comes to the case, Kano State, Judiciary was going the route. In a recent judgment of the Court of Appeal, where 5-man judges sat on the case of Peter Obi versus Tinubu. You know, to make a constitutional pronouncement in the full panel of the judges of the Court of Appeal. That's 5. 5 judges. Justice Mohammed Bello, Justice Ani, Justice Bolaji, and 2 others made a pronouncement on Section 131 of the Constitution, subsection C, which is same with Section 177C of the Constitution. 177C talks about the qualification for gubernatorial election. 131C talks about the qualification for presidential election. In determining the case before them, they decided, and equally in pronouncing Section 77 of the Electoral Act, whereby all political parties were mandated within 30 days before the election to submit their voters' register. There was a case before them that Peter Obi's name was not on the register of Labour Party. And what did these judges do in determining Section 131? They described and made a constitutional pronouncement that no political party has the power to look into the activities of another political party. And even if another political party has power to look into the activities of another political party, it is already statute bar, because this is supposed to be a pre-election matter. And they went ahead to cite that in plethora of cases which the appeal court and even the Supreme Court have decided, it has been decided that political party activities should be left to the political party. The National Working Committee is the highest organ of any political party. They are to be determined who their member is. And in the case of Peter Obi, they equally mentioned that for the political party, the Labour Party, to have submitted the name of Mr. Obi, they have already satisfied the constitutional means. No political party will submit the name of an alien who does not belong to that political party. And funny enough, INEC introduced a new pattern this time around. Every political party was given a certain code so that issues of the past of multiplicity of submissions of names to the INEC will be taken care of. There was a code that you can use to submit the name of your candidates, to upload the name of the candidates and their forms. And on these forms, you cannot even be able to submit it without including the number of the voters' card of your candidates. So the NNPP has satisfied the constitutional rules they were supposed to do. And these judges held that Peter Obi is a member of the Labour Party and has been constitutionally nominated. But here we were faced by another judge saying that 177C has not been satisfied, that the name of His Excellency Abba Kabir Yusuf was not in the register of the New Nigeria People's Party. And funny enough, all election cases before the tribunal or everywhere are so generic. They are in a class of their own. But these judges, in their own wisdom, were citing allied matter in making their pronouncement. I recall I was seated in the court. This judge said that to be able to register a company, you must satisfy the requirement of submitting the names of the shareholders of that company. That is when you meet the requirement. You cannot cite allied matters in a political case. I'm not a lawyer, but from my own experience and knowing what law is, it is common sense. As a layman, I am questioning that you cannot cite allied matter in determining a so generic case, a case of political dispensation, a case of politics in that same regard. There is no embargo on any political party on their registration. And no law has ever said that it is mandatory that names of candidates must appear on the register of the political party.
All right. Well, even though there are attendant issues, but since we've got Saliu Tanko Yakasai on the other side, so we'll let him also give his opening perspectives. So, Mr. Yakasai, I haven't heard him here. It suggests that it's not yet Uhuru for the APC. What's your response in terms of what the NNPP thinks of this matter?
Thank you very much, Chamberlain, and good morning to all of us anti-Nigerians as well. I've heard his argument, and I've heard the submissions made by Associate Professor Richard Wokocha. And you can see clearly that I think for us in the APC, we followed due process. We tendered all the right evidences and all the right witnesses, right from the tribunal up to the appeal court, where we were able to prove that Abba Kabir Yusuf is not a member of NNPP, and definitely and also on the issue of the 165,000 invalid votes as well. You see, the mistake that people make, I always cite this, the mistake that people make is that they do not follow court cases while they are ongoing. They usually wait for the judgment, and then they begin to assess the judgment based on their sentiments and emotions. I followed the case right at the tribunal level, and I kept wondering, because there are instances where the NNPP is supposed to have countered the witnesses or evidences that were presented to the courts by APC, but they didn't. They were supposed to provide their own evidences and witnesses to corroborate their points and their facts, but they didn't, you know. And the courts are places that deal with facts and evidences that are presented by the parties. You know, the APC was able to present a certified true copy of the registered membership of NNPP that was submitted to INEC 30 days before the primary election, and Abba Kabir Yusuf's name was not on that register. And I was a candidate in 2023, and I know the processes that Jam was speaking about. If you write any number on the form and you submit it, it's not the responsibility of INEC to say this is the right number, this is the wrong number. It is just to keep the record, you know, and it is in cases like this when you went to court that you can prove whether he's a member or not. They brought in a register to the tribunal, which was generated 2 months after the election. That is 3 months after the expiration of the deadline for the submission of party register to INEC according to the law. 2 months after. And his name was on that one, but it's not on the certified true copy register that was submitted. There's also the issue of 165,000 votes that were removed. According to the Electoral Act, it stated that any ballot paper that is not stamped, is not dated, and is not signed is an invalid paper. And we all know, and we also saw how ballot boxes were destroyed during the election, and they were snatched and taken away. And so who knows? Perhaps in those cases, some agents stuffed ballot papers in those boxes, and that is why you have some of these invalid ballot papers that were not stamped, dated, and not signed. So these are all some of the facts of the case that have been presented, and of course, the judgment is very thorough. I read the judgment of the tribunal. It's very thorough. I'm waiting
we will be posing the question of the ballot papers to Mr. Jamu
so that they can see the facts of the matter
very soon. But I want to take you up on the issue of the person who can raise whether or not somebody is a member of a political party or was a member at the time when the person was duly nominated. Indeed, Mr. Wokocha, our earlier guest, intervened on that matter, and it wasn't just the Court of Appeal. I think the Supreme Court also upheld that only a member of that same political party can raise the issue. And when he was intervening on what had happened in Plateau, he said it was a different kettle of fish, in the sense that this was about not just nomination now, but Congresses, as to whether or not the processes that also have brought up the governor even happened at all because of an earlier notification by a court order, which seems to have been contravened. There is no such situation here in Kano. So I'd like to know, on what grounds is the APC in Kano raising this, when it is something that only somebody who is within the NNPP that should be raising this?
Let's just like Professor Richard has stated, there's a constitutional provision, Section 177, subsection C of the Constitution, that stated who a candidate, the criteria for a person to become a candidate of a political party. Section 177, subsection C stated that you have to be a member of a political party and you have to be sponsored by that political party. So we are basing our argument on the fact that, is in the Constitution, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So it is how you present your arguments in court that will determine how the court will rule. Perhaps maybe in the case of Peter Obi, those that are challenging him presented their argument, challenging with regards to issue of primary election, but we are not talking about their primary election. Whatever they did in their primary election is their business. We are not a party to it and we don't care. But what we are saying is that there's a constitutional provision, 177C, that they did not meet. It's the same way as someone not having or attaining the age to be a governor or having the right qualification, to contest that. So it's how you present your case. It is the prayer that you present in your case that the court will rule upon. And we have to wait, just like Professor Richard said, we have to wait.
That's taken. Let me quickly come to Mr. Jamu. He's raised
the one to decide on that. And like I said, we also have, apart from that, we also have the issue of 165,000 votes as well. So we have many cases, we have many facts that are presented, and I'm sure the Supreme Court, I'm very, very confident that the Supreme Court will rule in our favor in all these prayers that we won from the tribunal to the Court of Appeal.
Well, he says they were not challenging the nomination of the primaries that produced your candidate, they're challenging whether he was even a member of the party at all at the time. And that's the basis upon which they have put this before the Supreme Court, which is a constitutional, the Court of Appeal, which is a constitutional matter. How do you respond to that?
Well, that was exactly what I said. I've made that very clear initially when I talked. I cited Section 133, Section 131, which the case of Peter Obi versus Tinubu. It was not a primary election matter as he referred. It's the presidential election matter. It's the presidential election tribunal that the 5 justices of the Court of Appeal ruled that no political party has the power to look into activities of another political party, and that Peter Obi has satisfied all constitutional requirement because his party, Labour Party, has submitted his name. And the mere fact that the party has submitted his name, that means he belongs to that political party. That is what the 5 judges of the Court of Appeal said. So citing Section 177, subsection C, is different from the other sections. If we're talking about maybe your age, educational requirement, and things like that, those are in their own class. But the determination of who belongs to a political party can only be determined by the political party itself. Okay. The courts have held that in several instances, only a political party can determine who its members are. Okay, so only a father can say who his son is.
Can you quickly, well, we now have DNA tests, but do you want to quickly intervene on this issue of signed ballot papers, etc.?
Okay, on the issue of the signed ballot papers too, I will advise my brother Salihu to read the Electoral Act sometimes before you come up and put up some arguments. Nowhere in the Electoral Act that the issue of ballot papers has been raised. The issue which the judge, in her own wisdom of the tribunal, based her issue, she cited Section 71 of the Electoral Act. And Section 71 of the Electoral Act is referring to the issue of result sheet. All result sheet must be stamped, dated, and signed. She made mention of Section 71 3 times in her judgment when she determined that. On the issue of the ballot paper, it is Section 3, Section 63, subsection 2, that made reference to ballot paper. And what that section was referring to is that any ballot paper that does not bear the INEC marks on it, the official INEC marks on it, once the presiding officer is satisfied that the ballot paper belongs to the booklet which he has issued, he should go ahead and take a decision and count it alongside. That is what the electoral, that was the...
Maybe I should just read it out. Section 63,
Section 2.
If the returning officer is satisfied that the ballot paper, which does not bear the official mark, was from a book of ballot papers which was furnished to the presiding officer of the polling unit, in which the vote was cast for use at the election in question, he or she shall, notwithstanding the absence of the official mark, count that ballot paper.
So this is the only place where the issue of the ballot paper has been raised. But check Section 71 of the Electoral Act. The judges of the tribunal used Section 71 in determining the case before it in Kano State. They used Section 71 in cancelling the 165,000 votes.
Where it talks about the result must be signed and countersigned.
Yes, the result sheet must be signed, stamped, and dated. That is what Section 71 of the Electoral Act says. The Electoral Act book is before you. You can read it.
So you're saying that they shouldn't have used this part?
They shouldn't have used that because ballot papers are not result sheets. They are 2 different. That is it. So
they're 2 different documents.
They are 2 different documents.
Well, I know that my colleague Ayo has more questions for you. Now we quickly have to go to Lagos. Ayo.
Well, I'll quickly follow up on that one, Mark. So when we say there are 2 different documents, I mean, a good number of people would agree with you, but isn't it one that validates the other?
Well, if you are talking about that, let's follow strictly what the law says. The law talks about result sheet here, that all result sheet must be stamped, dated, and signed. There is nowhere in the Electoral Act, you can read the Electoral Act from the head to the toe, nowhere in the Electoral Act where it is decided that ballot papers must be stamped, dated, and signed. The only mention of ballot paper is Section 63, subsection 2. And what the makers or the framers of the Electoral Act meant there is that they only talked about the official marks on the ballot paper. And that is it. So I don't even know from where those judges will cite Section 71 and cancel 165,000 votes that were duly counted and announced after the election. And then one funny thing, let me even go back to a little bit part of that case. Those 165,000 votes were not even part of the pleading of the APC. APC did not plead them. They were not part of the pleadings. They were not even looked at during the cross-examination. It was after APC have closed their case, all other parties to the matter have closed their case. Those ballot papers were tendered through the bar, how on earth can some things like that be done, you know? So that's just it. The courts have already taken their decision. The Court of Appeal has taken its own route and its own decision. We are going to go to the Supreme Court and wait and see what the decision of the Supreme Court
I'd like to stick on that.
I know it is a miscarriage of justice.
Well, I would like to stick with that, you know, for a bit. So as far as you are concerned, given what you know, and you say, of course, that you're not a lawyer, that's granted, what validates a ballot paper? Because, I mean, anyone could just as well have gone anywhere to print. I mean, and this issue of signed and stamped and all of that, that's even one of the things that validates a result sheet in the first place. So how do you think, you know, the law can be, are you proposing that if it's going to be something substantive, that it should be put into the law if you say, as you say, it is not in the law, that the paper should be stamped and signed by an electoral officer?
Well, we have had several cases. If you remember, even in the past, we have had the case of, I think, General Muhammadu Buhari versus Atiku Abubakar over the issue of serialization of ballot papers. And despite the ballot papers were not serialized, it did not invalidate or even call the integrity of the election at that particular time. So the issue of stamping, dating, and whatever of the ballot papers, if the framers of the laws of Nigeria find it more worthy, I think there should be an amendment to the Electoral Act. If that should be mandatory for elections in the future, there should be an amendment to the Electoral Act to that. So what I can say, we can only rely on what the Electoral Act, because the Electoral Act is the book that guides how elections should be held in Nigeria.
Let me come back to you to you now, Mr. Salihu Tanko, in our Kano studio this morning. You know, so now, as far as you are concerned, it seems like things have been done, you know, for you. But one of the issues that has been raised about this matter is that increasingly the courts, and my colleague Marco mentioned this earlier, the fact that the votes are no longer in contention now. It is the technicalities around it. Is it to say that the people really didn't want your candidate, and consequently they voted for the other party, you know, significantly, which election, according to INEC and the declaration at the Collation Center, they won? But your party is looking for some technicality and not just the number of votes. Mr. Tanko Yakasai, I can't really hear you at this moment. I can't hear you at this moment. We'll get back to you on that one. So let me come back to you in our Abuja studio while we're waiting for that issue to be resolved, Mr. Jamo. So now, what are your expectations in at the Supreme Court? Because these, even though on the one hand we hear it's these are pre-election, there are some pre-election matters, that's the idea of sponsorship or nomination or membership of a political party. But then there is also this other bit, you know, about the fact that, you know, the papers were not signed. Should the Supreme Court, what are your expectations from the Supreme Court about these two issues at least?
Well, my expectation from the Supreme Court, we have always believed that the courts are the last bus stop for the common man, and that the courts are there to do justice. And the Supreme Court, I know in several instances, have been able to right some of the miscarriages of justices that has taken place at the tribunal or even at the Court of Appeal. So we have very strong confidence that the learned and wise gentlemen at the Supreme Court will look at this matter dispassionately and look at it from the point of law and determine it. On the issue of membership of a political party, whether His Excellency Abba Kabir Yusuf is a member of a political party, the NNPP or not, the Supreme Court has held in several instances, like I said before, that no one has the right to look at the activities of a political party. And I believe they will do justice and quash the decision of the Court of Appeal. And even on the 165,000 ballot papers that were cancelled by the tribunal and not looked at by the Court of Appeal, I'm sure the Supreme Court in their own wisdom will look at it and see where the errors have taken place and correct it.
All right,
so,
let's try and see if we can get Tanko in. So, Tanko, I'm sorry, Salih, let me, the points that Mr. Muhammad made about Section 63.2, I need to get your response on that one, where he was talking about returning officer being satisfied with the ballot paper. So here he says, well, the key thing, I think, is the point he's trying to make is notwithstanding the absence of the official mark, count the ballot papers. So if I understand this point, right, if you have 50 pages on a booklet and 25 are stamped, 25 are not stamped, and the official counts all of them, so that singular act of counting it, to some extent, to a large extent, validates all the others stamped or not signed. So he then wonders, how is it then that the court can rely on this and Section 71 for those deductions? That seems to be the point NNPP is making.
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier on, Mr. Chamberlain, I think it's not just about, it is not about discarding the votes that are valid or stamped. You know, there's a procedure, there's a process, you know, and because in the past, politicians, you know how sometimes they can be, some of them, you know, they create their own ballot papers, they do all these things, they stuff the ballot boxes with all these things, and that is why some of these like a checkpoints, if you must point it that way, are being put to checkmate all these things. You understand, you know, and it is not all the votes that are being discarded. It is only those that we believe are not stamped and dated and signed. So if a party, it is the responsibility of the party to make sure it trains its agents, to make sure it trains all those that are going to stand in for it.
Yeah, but Salih, pardon me to jump in. On this particular point,
it is also the responsibility of the election umpire.
If you're saying that,
to ensure that its own ad hoc staff that are out in the field also take note of this. But for me,
can you hear me, Salih?
Since the coming of this electoral act that was signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari in 2022, you know, it has.
Just a minute. We have a few minutes to go, so let me just put in this one so that both of you can respond, and then we'll wrap it up. So, are you suggesting that INEC counted the ballots that were deducted was counted by INEC, knowing full well that they were what, fake ballot papers or something?
Well, how will we know? You know, what we are saying is that this was what we saw during the inspection of the ballot boxes that were there. We don't know if who was responsible for that. I'm just saying that everybody at the day of the election is supposed to pay attention to these things. And during the inspection of the ballot boxes that we did in over 32 local governments, this is what we find. So there was nobody there for us to know if it is 100% the fault of INEC or the fault of party agents, whatever it is. But when we went for inspection, this is what we find in these ballot boxes, and this is what we tendered in the court. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Your closing thoughts, sir.
Well, my closing thought, I think what I will just say is that I want to still call on Nigerians, especially people from Kano, to continue to believe in the courts. I am very confident that the miscarriages that have taken place at the tribunal and the Court of Appeal will be corrected at the Supreme Court. And I want to use this occasion to congratulate the presiding judge who was able to deliver justice, the judgment in the case of Kano State, who on the eve of the judgment they delivered against the NNPP government in Kano State was elevated to the Supreme Court. So I want to use this occasion to congratulate him and wish him long life.
Okay, it turns out it's at least, how do you say it in politics? It's a game of interest, not necessarily what? Okay.
Well, we shouldn't even use the word game of interest. We're talking about more than 1 million people that have voted.
I mean the mantra, politics.
Yeah.
It's a game of interest.
Yeah, politics is a game of interest.
That's the mantra that I was referring to.
That's the mantra.
All right, we have to thank you for coming on this morning. Mohammed Jamu, Special Advisor, International Public Relations to the Governor of Kano State, and Saliu Tanko Yakasai, SSA to the APC Chairman on ICT and Digital Communications. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay, let's say this is the first mail we've got here from Ewuga Abene, who says, on election matters, we, the electorate, will go out and spend all the hours under the sun to elect our candidates. Then the judiciary, made up of 3 or 5 members, will determine our fate. The courts should not be choosing for us. Most candidates that the courts are declaring winner didn't even win at their polling unit. A House of Representatives member in Plateau State was sacked for his opponent that won in just 1 word. Where is the common principle of natural justice? Okay, well, that's the show today. Apologies to everyone else. Kizito Wayham, who took time to send in his message, as well as all the others. Thank you for your messages, though. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf. Have a great week.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a lovely day.